And I'm live. I'm live. I'm live. And I'm going to share this. Let's see. I'm going to share this. I'm going to put it up. Let people know that I am live. I'm live and I'm going to put it up. Well, sorry I took so long, but I'm here. And for this stream, as you can tell by the title of the stream is Geography in Baseball, to and from and back to the river. And if you look at the thumbnail, that thumbnail is of Forbes Field. Forbes Field is where Major League Baseball's Pittsburgh Pirates used to play. That's where they used to play. They currently play in PNC Park. They went through 3 different stadiums before settling in PNC Park. They played in Exposition Park. They played in Forbes Field, which is the subject of this live stream. They played in Three Rivers Stadium. They played there, and now they play in PNC Park. So now, from the 1890s into the first decade of the 20th century, the Pittsburgh Pirates played in Exposition Park, and that stadium was located on the Allegheny River. Now, I'm going to show you something for a moment. Pull out that trusty Google Earth. One moment. If you look at this right here, you look. That's Pittsburgh. And as you can see, it comes at the confluence of 3 rivers. The Monongahela and the Allegheny River all come together to form the Ohio River. Now I show you that for a reason. The river, that where Exposition Park was located. The Pirates were faced with some problems. I'm going to have to cut this off. I'm going to have to cut this off because this is getting annoying. Actually, I can share this. Actually, what I'll do is share this out right now on Twitter. I'm going to share it on Twitter. I'm going to And I just shared it. But Exposition Park is located, it was located where the Allegheny River is, on the banks of the Allegheny River. Now, one thing to understand about the city of Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh would not be Pittsburgh without its rivers. Pittsburgh, it was founded on three rivers. That is why one of the stadiums that the Pirates used to play in was called Three River Stadium, because three rivers. However, there is a big problem with this. Like a lot of places located on rivers, they're very susceptible to flooding. Places like Cincinnati, St. Louis, New Orleans, Minneapolis, Pittsburgh's no exception. And whenever you would have flooding events, Exposition Park would get flooded. And that posed a big problem. It posed a big problem for the players, posed a big problem for the fans. It was just not really, when you're in an environment where it floods easily, it's not really a conducive environment. It's not really a great environment. It causes a lot of problems. Now, what was the solution? Well, Pittsburgh is a city not just of three rivers, it's a city of hills. It's a city where you can build a little further up. Because of the amount of hills in Pittsburgh, you can build your stadium a little further up. And Barney Dreyfuss had an idea. He came across some land, he acquired some land right around the Oakland neighborhood. Oakland neighborhood is east of downtown. It's east of downtown Pittsburgh. And you're further away from the river, you're further away from a lot of the industrial areas, from most of the industry. You're further away from a river or three rivers actually that could flood on you really fast. And he had this land and he had an idea. Build a stadium for the Pirates here. Build it in the Oakland neighborhood near Shenley Park. You're near a park and you're near all this beautiful area dotted with trees, and it's just so beautiful. And you figured, build it here. Now, there are some issues building. There are some issues building here. You had the situation of, well, you had a ravine in that area. You had a 30-foot deep ravine. And that's kind of where you needed to build. You needed land for the field. And one thing that he had to do, basically, this is, to build that stadium, he had to fill up a ravine and tear down a hill. Basically, when you think about geography and you think about, urban planning and you think about how man sometimes will take certain land features and change them in order to fit a certain desire that he has. In this case, you had Barney Dreyfuss trying to have a new stadium built, and what he's done, he fills up a ravine, he tears down a hill, because you need a relatively flatter surface to have a baseball field. And that's difficult to do in a city with a lot of hills and ravines, because you got to think about the region of Pittsburgh. You got to think about this region. And excuse me for a moment, I have to go get my plug. Much better. You have to think about the region Pittsburgh is in. Pittsburgh is in a very hilly region. You have a lot of ridges and you have a lot of valleys. In fact, I'm going to show you. Let me show you where this is. You know, you look you look at the topography of western Pennsylvania, you see some of the hills and valleys. In fact, I'm going to move it up a little further. Yeah, that's Pittsburgh right there. You look at that area, believe it or not, part of the Appalachian Mountain Range goes up through Pittsburgh. A lot of people don't think about that because when a lot of people think about Appalachia, they think about places like Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia especially. Well, Pennsylvania is bordered by West Virginia, so that's something you should think about. In fact, I'm going to show you something here for a moment. I'll show you a little geography lesson here. There's Pennsylvania. There's Pennsylvania right there. And there's West Virginia. West Virginia borders Pennsylvania towards the southwest side. On the side, basically, West Virginia and Pennsylvania share where northeast Virginia is, southwest Pennsylvania meets. And so you got to really think about it. Those mountains that go up through West Virginia, they go up through Pennsylvania. So a lot of people really don't think about, Appalachia going up through Pennsylvania. And yet Pittsburgh sometimes gets called Paris of Appalachia. You don't hear that nickname very often. You hear Pittsburgh being associated more with steel. Makes sense because Pittsburgh has long been producing a lot of that. Pittsburgh is associated with three rivers. Makes sense. But Pittsburgh is hardly ever associated with Appalachia, despite the fact that it's kind of part of it. It's part of it. And so you have a city like Pittsburgh, which is really hilly and really rough terrain. And you got to have a place that's flat, and you got to be able to build a stadium. So what do? This is what Barney Dreyfuss did. He filled in a ravine, and then he bulldozed the hill. That is how he was able to create the outfield on Forbes Field. That's how he was able to create that. There are a few geographic factors you really have to think about. You got to think about the city of Pittsburgh being a city of three rivers. It's very beneficial for commercial traffic if you want to have your barges go down the river from Pittsburgh and you want to transport items like glass and steel and other stuff that would be produced in Pittsburgh or the greater Pittsburgh area. Or you want to transport some items from Pittsburgh down to West Virginia via the Monongahela, because the Monongahela River goes through West Virginia before meeting in Pittsburgh with the Allegheny River, before forming the Ohio River. Because here's a little thing to consider. You could travel from Pittsburgh to New Orleans. Theoretically, you could do this. And if anybody decides they want to try it, you got my back 100%. Yeah, you got my support 100% if you want to do this. You could theoretically travel from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to New Orleans, Louisiana via boat without ever touching a highway. You just got to take the Ohio River from Pittsburgh, and then it joins with and then you join with the Mississippi River around Carroll, Illinois. You go south from there on the Mississippi River until you hit New Orleans. You can do that. You can do that, and I'd back you 100% if you did. I'd say travel, do it. You know, plenty of people make river journeys. Go and do it, but be careful when you do it. Be smart about it. You know, I want you to make it to New Orleans and go back to your home in one piece. But that's neither here nor there. But yeah, you look at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, it's on three rivers, and then you got a stadium next to the river. There are a lot of issues with that. You got a lot of issues with flooding, and Exposition Park having suffered from the floods. They figured, you know what, we got to move the stadium further away from the river. So we're going to move it further, to the Oakland neighborhood. We'll move it here. We'll build here. Oh, it's hilly. We got to fill in a ravine and take a hill down. Make it a little flatter. And that's how. And then there was one thing that actually helped. See, when you're building a stadium, you got to build that thing, and you gotta have steel. Pittsburgh produces plenty of steel, so they didn't have far to go for the stuff. You know, this is Pittsburgh towards 1909. They didn't have very far to go to get the steel because Pittsburgh is producing the steel. At that time, Pittsburgh had so many steel mills in the city. It's like you want steel, you need steel. You don't have far to go. Just go buy some from the steel mill next, right there. You had steel mills everywhere in Pittsburgh and other places in Pennsylvania at that time because, Pennsylvania's economy being, Western Pennsylvania's economy, particularly around the Pittsburgh area, being big on steel. This is why the NFL team is called the Pittsburgh Steelers. It has a lot to do with steel. Oh, by the way, the Pittsburgh Pirates, the name of that team has nothing to do with it. Actually had something to do with, Pittsburgh pirating some players away from other teams, hence pirate. But it would actually be kind of fitting for a team located on three rivers to be called the Pirates. Pirates and a lot of sailing going on. But that's you look at a place like Pittsburgh, be it on three rivers, being susceptible to flooding. And the idea is we're going to move the stadium further up. We're going to move it up where it's harder to flood. We got to make some changes to the land, so we can have a good ball field to play on. And for about 60 or so years, it worked. One of the criticisms that Barney Dreyfuss had to deal with was the fact that Pittsburgh hadn't grown as big. Like, Pittsburgh reached its population peak right around 1950. At this time, the population was a little smaller. The city of Pittsburgh was not as big. And the location of the stadium was further away from downtown. And you had some criticism because, it's a 10-minute trolley ride from downtown. People had an issue, at that time. 10-minute trolley ride from downtown is considered, it's not like today where you got to sit in bumper to bumper traffic, and 10 minutes from downtown is actually a pretty short distance. Back in those days, it was different. But people criticized it because that part of town wasn't as well developed. You had a lot of trees. It was further removed from where a lot of people would want to. It was so far removed. It was somewhat far removed. The city of Pittsburgh grew around the stadium. And you notice something. You see in a lot of places, in many places, people would build stadiums. People would build a stadium around a city. You would have to find a way to, pencil in that stadium around a grid or, find a way to make room for the stadium. Forbes Field had the opposite problem. It wasn't, do we find room for a stadium? The problem was, how far are we from the main population? The problem, see, with most places, you got to make room. With Forbes Field, the city just grew around it. And so, for that reason, that was sort of how Forbes Field became a success. And you think about the geography, you think about the urban planning, you think about just so much that went into making Forbes Field a home for the Pirates. Pirates got 3 world championships out of that. The latest one was in 1960 when Bill Mazeroski hit that home run, beating the New York Yankees in 1960. And it cost Casey Stengel his job as manager of the Yankees. But that's neither here or there. When you think about, the title, To, From, and Back to the River, around the early 1970s, the Pittsburgh Pirates kind of understood that, well, actually it was understood going into the 60s that Forbes Field was showing its age. The Pirates had been in that the Pittsburgh Pirates had been in that stadium for basically 50 plus years. Ball players like Honus Wagner played there, Ralph Kiner played there, Roberto Clemente played the first part of his career. Basically, you had so many players over several generations that played in that stadium, from Honus Wagner to Ralph Kiner to Roberto Clemente. Roberto would be sort of that link. Roberto Clemente, Willie Stargell played in that stadium too. I think Roberto and Willie and Bill Mazeroski, that crop of players that came in during the 50s and early 60s, they would be kind of part of that transition from Forbes Field to Three Rivers Stadium. And for many intents and purposes, Forbes Field stood as sort of a geographic wonder. Geography plays a big role in how baseball stadiums are built and why baseball stadiums are built where they are. In this case, it was to avoid flooding. And many people liked it because, many people, you got to think about the human geography aspect of it. Many people kind of looked at Forbes Field as this oasis because you're thinking about Pittsburgh during pretty much the middle of the 20, from 1909 to 1970, which is pretty much how long the Pirates were there in that stadium. You think about the sort of this oasis, you've got University of Pittsburgh not too far away, you got Shenley Park, you got trees, and it's sort of like this little oasis in a very rough and tumble environment. You have, the steel mills, the smoke and the pollutants coming from those steel mills going upward. And, people, when it was first built, it was kind of out of the way. But as the city grew around Forbes Field, people loved it. But, being tucked away at first, it was like, an oasis. in a very urban environment. Now I talked about to and from the river, and now I'm about to talk about going back to the river. I noted earlier in the stream, Three Rivers Stadium is where, Three Rivers Stadium, obviously talking about the three rivers of Pittsburgh. I will show you again if you missed. Hopefully, Pittsburgh Dad is watching this. You know, Pittsburgh Dad being a famous, very, Pittsburgh YouTuber. See, Three Rivers. You got Three Rivers right there. Oh, freak. You got Three Rivers. You got the Allegheny, the Monongahela, and they all form the Ohio River. Three Rivers. And that's why Three Rivers Stadium got its name. They took the Pirates and took them back to the river. They took them back to the river, and they would stay in Three Rivers Stadium for 30 years. And there would occasionally be floods. And this, strangely enough, the river kind of scared the Pirates away from that golden triangle around, the golden triangle where the three rivers meet. It scared people away from the river, but people are going back to the river. And they build Three River Stadium right there, and the Pirates are play there. They would get two more world championships out of it, 71 and 79. But you really think about it, you're in the heart of downtown where all the action is and where a lot of people gather. And so many people think about it. It's like, we'll build the stadium here. We'll build it here. We'll build it around the river. Because, that's where the downtown is. That's where a lot of people gather. And, that would be the home for the Pirates until 2001. 2001, they go into PNC Park. And PNC Park has its own geographic kitsch because you have the river, you have the Allegheny River literally in their backyard. And so, think about where the San Francisco Giants play. Coincidentally, they both played each other in the 1971 National League Championship Series. The Pirates would win that one and would go to win the 1971 World Series, all thanks to Roberto Clemente. But that's neither here or there. The San Francisco Giants play around Oracle Park, and you have the bay right behind the stadium, and, hit a home run, splash into the water. It would be some time though before somebody would hit a home run out of PNC Park into the Allegheny River. Now, one of the things about the river that people worry about is flooding. And so while floods still occur in Pittsburgh, and while it has affected PNC Park in some ways, the way the park was designed when they built PNC Park, they built it with the preparation of flooding in mind. And what they did above the bank, or you go past the banks of the Allegheny River, you have a walkway. You go past that walkway, you have this grassy embankment. This little grassy embankment area. And then past there, another walkway further up high. And it's looked at, as a way to try to, slow down the flooding. Because, people are understanding, it's going to flood in Pittsburgh. You're on three rivers. It's going to happen sometime. So it's a matter of how do we deal with Mother Nature? How do we deal with the floods? How do you deal with all of that? And it's you think about baseball, you think about baseball stadiums and building them in a certain area and how to deal with things like flooding. Before it was you run away from the river. Now you figure out how do you slow down the flooding? How do you maintain that balance between man and nature? And, you know, just, how to live with the river because the river is necessary, the river is needed. And at the same time, you got a stadium. How do you slow down the flooding? And at the same time, have a stadium next to the river. And this concludes my special on geography and baseball. This was about the Pittsburgh Pirates and their journey from being on the river to getting away from the river and going back. And if you like, apparently nobody came into the stream. I wonder, I'm hoping, oh well. Oh well, if people missed it, they can catch it on the replay. If you catch this on the replay and you like it, be sure to like the video, be sure to make some comments, be sure to subscribe.